Imagine waking up without an alarm, no phone buzzing on the nightstand, no traffic sounds filtering through the window, no schedule to check, no emails waiting, no meetings to prepare for. Instead, you open your eyes to the soft grey light of dawn filtering into a rock shelter. The air is cool and crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and earth. Somewhere nearby you can hear the low murmur of voices as others in your group begin to stir. A baby cries briefly, then settles. Someone laughs. Outside, birds are calling to each other in the growing light. This is how humans woke up for hundreds of thousands of years. This was morning. It's 40,000 years ago, give or take a few millennia. You're a Homo sapiens living somewhere in what we'd now call Europe or Africa or Asia. Anatomically, you're identical to modern humans. Same brain size, same body structure, same capacity for language and thought and emotion. But your world, your daily reality is so alien to ours that it's almost impossible to imagine. So here's the question that keeps archaeologists and anthropologists endlessly fascinated. What did you actually do all day? See, we have this image burned into our minds from countless movies and documentaries. Cavemen, brutish and hairy, constantly running from saber-toothed tigers, spending every waking moment desperately searching for food, always on the edge of starvation, living nasty, brutish, and short lives of pure survival. That's the picture, right? Prehistoric life as one long nightmare of hardship and terror, except it's almost completely wrong. The archaeological evidence tells a radically different story. Early humans weren't just surviving, they were living. They had rich social lives, leisure time, art, music, spirituality, humour. They told stories around fires. They decorated their bodies. They carved intricate figurines and painted breathtaking images on cave walls. They cared for their elderly and disabled. They buried their dead with ceremony and grave goods. They had culture, complex and sophisticated culture, that we're only beginning to understand. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before we can talk about cave paintings and ritual burials, we need to understand the basics. What did a typical day actually look like? How did our ancestors spend their time when there were no jobs to commute to, no bills to pay, no grocery stores to visit, when survival meant something entirely different than it does today? The truth is going to surprise you. Early humans probably worked less than you do. Study of modern hunter-gatherer societies, which offer our best window into prehistoric lifestyles, show that people typically spent only 4 to 6 hours a day on what we'd call subsistence activities. Gathering food, hunting, preparing meals, maintaining tools and shelters. That's it. The rest of the time was leisure. Socializing, playing, creating art, telling stories, just hanging out. This flies in the face of everything we've been told about progress. We imagine our ancestors as desperately poor in time and resources, while we're rich and comfortable. But in terms of free time, the opposite might be true. A prehistoric human probably had more leisure hours in a week than most modern people get in a month. If you're watching this to fall asleep, that's exactly why I make these videos. Maybe subscribe and let me know, where are you right now and what time is it? I always check the comments and it's fascinating. Someone in Tokyo at sunrise, someone in London at lunch, someone in California at midnight, all drifting off to the same stories about our shared human past. The more we study prehistoric life, the more complex and nuanced the picture becomes. Yes, there were dangers. Injuries were common and often serious. Infant mortality was high. Infections that we'd treat with antibiotics could be deadly. Life expectancy was lower than today, though not as low as you might think. If you survived childhood, you had a decent chance of living into your 50s or 60s. Some individuals made it much longer. But here's what really matters. Within those years, people lived full lives. They laughed, loved, mourned, created, struggled, celebrated. They weren't just biological machines optimized for survival. They were human in every sense we understand that word. They had the same fundamental needs we do. Food and shelter, yes, but also connection, meaning, beauty, play. So let's walk through a day together. Not a dramatic day with a mammoth hunt or a confrontation with a rival group. Though those happen too, just a regular day. An ordinary day 40,000 years ago when an early human woke up to the dawn and lived their life in ways that were both utterly foreign and strangely familiar to how we live ours. Because understanding how our ancestors actually spent their time doesn't just teach us about the past, it raises uncomfortable questions about the present, about how we live now, about what we've gained with civilization and what we might have lost, about whether progress always means what we think it means. Let's start at the beginning, with that moment when grey light filters into the rock shelter and another prehistoric day begins. You're not waking up to an alarm. There are no alarms. There's no concept of being late, no schedule to keep, no boss waiting. Instead, consciousness returns slowly, naturally, pulled back by the gradual lightening of the sky and the stirring of bodies around you. The first thing you notice is the cold. Not the bone-deep, life-threatening cold of deep winter, but that crisp morning chill that makes you reluctant to leave the warmth of your sleeping spot. You're lying on a bed of dried grasses and animal skins, pressed close to other members of your band. Not for intimacy necessarily, just survival. Body heat is a resource too valuable to waste. The second thing you notice is the smell. Wood smoke. Always wood smoke, but faint now. The fire that burned bright last night has died down to embers. Mixed with that is the scent of unwashed bodies. Not unpleasant exactly, just human. The smell of rendered animal fat from yesterday's meal. The earthy, mineral smell of the rock shelter itself. If you're near the coast, maybe salt air. If you're inland during spring, the green smell of new growth. Someone is already awake. There's always someone awake. Sleep in the Paleolithic wasn't like modern sleep. We have evidence, both from studying modern hunter-gatherers and from sleep research, that humans probably practiced what scientists call biphasic or polyphasic sleep. You'd sleep for a few hours after dark, then wake for a period in the middle of the night. This wasn't insomnia. This was normal. During that wakeful period, people would talk quietly, tend the fire, check on children, maybe make love, maybe just lie there thinking whatever thoughts people think when the world is silent and dark. This meant that at any given moment during the night, someone was usually awake. Someone was listening for the sounds that didn't belong. The footfall of a predator, the crack of a branch, the distant howl that meant danger was moving through the territory. Safety wasn't something you could take for granted. It was something you maintained, hour by hour, through vigilance and cooperation. The person who's awake now is feeding the fire. You can hear the soft sounds of movement, see the sudden brightening as flames catch on new fuel. Fire management was maybe the most important skill your people possessed. Let it die completely and you'd have to restart it, either by carrying embers from another group's fire, possibly miles away, or by using friction methods that were exhausting and time-consuming. Better to keep it going. Better to make sure someone always took responsibility for feeding it through the night. Who did that job varied. Sometimes the elderly, who slept lighter anyway and had already proven their worth to the group in 1,000 other ways. Sometimes young adults, particularly those without small children who needed their parents' full attention. Sometimes it rotated, an informal understanding that everyone contributed to the survival of the whole. As the fire builds, more people begin to stir. Children first, usually. Kids wake up ready to move, ready to play, just like they do now. You hear a small voice, the rustling of bodies, a mother's soft murmur telling a child to stay close, stay warm, wait for the sun. But children are terrible at waiting. Within minutes, a few of the older ones are up, stretching, moving toward the fire, their breath visible in the cold air. The adults wake more slowly. There's no rush. This is important to understand. The entire concept of rushing, of hurrying, of being pressed for time, these are modern inventions. Your day is governed by light, by hunger, by the weather, by the seasons. The sun is just beginning to paint the eastern sky in shades of grey and pink. There are hours before you need to be doing anything in particular. Right now, the most important thing is transitioning from sleep to wakefulness in a way that doesn't waste the precious calories you'll need for whatever the day brings. So people stretch, slowly, methodically, working out the stiffness that comes from sleeping on the ground. They yawn, scratch, attend to basic bodily functions. If you're in a rock shelter or cave, there's probably a designated area for waste, far enough away to avoid contamination but close enough to be safe. If you're in a temporary camp, people simply walk a short distance into the surrounding vegetation. Someone, probably one of the more experienced members of the group, steps outside the immediate sleeping area to check the surroundings. Not paranoid exactly, but careful. What changed during the night? Are there tracks near the camp that weren't there yesterday? What's the weather doing? Is that cloud formation in the west promising rain or just passing through? Is the wind shifting, bringing different scents, different information about what's happening in the wider world? This morning assessment is crucial. Paleolithic humans were readers of signs in ways we can barely imagine. They could tell from the behavior of birds whether a predator was nearby. They could read weather patterns days in advance by watching clouds, feeling humidity, noticing how different plants responded to atmospheric changes. They could identify individual animals by their tracks and tell you how long ago they passed, whether they were healthy or injured, alone or part of a herd. All this information gets processed and importantly shared. As more people wake and gather around the growing fire, there's conversation. Quiet at first, then building as the group consciousness comes online. Dreams might be discussed. The Paleolithic mind probably didn't draw hard boundaries between dreaming and waking reality. A vivid dream might be interpreted as a message, a warning, a visit from ancestors. Worth talking about, worth considering. Plans begin to form, but loosely. The group needs food, but that's always true. The question is what kind of food and where to find it. Someone might have noticed yesterday that certain berry bushes were nearly ripe. Someone else might have seen signs of a large animal moving through a particular valley. A third person might suggest checking fishing spots if you're near water. None of these are orders. Nobody is in charge in the way we think of leadership. Instead, decisions emerge from discussion, from consensus, from individuals choosing to follow those with relevant expertise. But that's still ahead. For now, in these early morning moments, the main activity is simply being together. The band, your extended family, your survival unit, is reassembling after the night's dissolution. Everyone made it through another period of vulnerability. Everyone is here, accounted for, ready for another day. There's comfort in that. There's safety in numbers, yes, but also something deeper. Something that explains why humans are so fundamentally social. We literally evolved to need each other. Those who felt content in groups, who drew comfort from proximity to kin, who enjoyed cooperation, those were the ones who survived the bottleneck. Their descendants, us, carry genes that make isolation feel wrong and community feel necessary. Children are playing now, their energy infectious. They're not playing anything structured, nothing with rules, just running, chasing, wrestling, the physical play that builds strength and coordination. The adults watch with half an attention, letting the kids be kids but ready to intervene if play gets too rough or someone wanders too far. Meanwhile, practical concerns are being addressed. Someone is checking tools from yesterday. Is that spear point still secure in its shaft? Did that carrying basket develop any weak spots that need repairing? Is there enough cordage for today's needs, or does someone need to spend time making more? These aren't chores in the modern sense. They're not unpleasant tasks you do before getting to what you want to do. They're just part of life, as natural as breathing. And all of this, all of it, is happening without any sense of time pressure. The sun is higher now, the morning chill beginning to fade. You've been awake maybe an hour, though you have no way to measure that and no reason to care. Your stomach is starting to remind you it's empty. Other people are probably feeling the same. Soon, attention will turn to food, but not yet. For now, you're warm. You're safe. You're surrounded by people who know you and care about your survival, because your survival increases their own chances. This is waking up in the Paleolithic. No sudden jarring into consciousness. No racing to get ready. Just the slow communal transition from sleep to activity, guided by light and bodies and the ancient rhythms that governed human life for hundreds of thousands of years. It's a pattern so fundamental that we still carry the biological echoes of it. That desire to hit snooze, to wake up slowly, to ease into the day rather than attacking it. That's not laziness. That's your Paleolithic brain remembering how mornings used to work back when we had all the time in the world and the only schedule that mattered was the movement of the sun across the sky. Let's talk about breakfast. Except your ancestors 40,000 years ago didn't have breakfast. Not in the way you think about it. They didn't wake up at 7 a.m., stumble to the kitchen, and pour themselves a bowl of cereal. They didn't have meal times at all, not really. They ate when food was available, when hunger demanded it, when the opportunity presented itself. This might sound chaotic, but it wasn't. It was perfectly adapted to their reality. Picture yourself waking up in that rock shelter as the first light filters through the entrance. Your stomach growls, you're hungry, so you eat. So, simple as that. What you're eating depends entirely on what's available. Maybe there's leftover meat from 2 days ago when the hunters brought down a red deer. It's been hanging in the cool back of the shelter, away from direct sunlight, wrapped in the deer's own hide. The cold autumn air has kept it from spoiling, though it's starting to develop that slightly gamey smell that means you should probably finish it today. You pull off a strip and chew it slowly. It's tough, requires real jaw work, but it's protein and fat and exactly what your body needs after a night of sleep. Your teeth are strong, your jaw muscles powerful. Dental analysis of Paleolithic skulls shows remarkable wear patterns, evidence of lifetimes spent processing tough foods. But here's what's fascinating. Those same teeth show something else. Microscopic plant residues, starch grains from roots and tubers, phytoliths from seeds and nuts. Your ancestors weren't just eating meat, they were eating everything. Beside the meat, there's a wooden bowl, really just a section of bark folded and sealed with pine resin, filled with hazelnuts gathered 3 days ago. You crack a few between your back molars, the technique passed down through generations. Children watch adults do this from infancy, learning the exact angle and pressure needed to crack the shell without crushing the meat inside. Next to the nuts, there's a leather pouch containing dried berries. Blackberries, gathered during the late summer abundance and dried in the sun. They're wrinkled now, concentrated sweetness, and you eat a handful. The sugar hits your system immediately, providing quick energy. But the real treasure is the basket of roots near the fire. Someone, probably one of the older women with decades of plant knowledge, dug these up yesterday from the riverbank. They're cattail roots, starchy and nutritious, but basically inedible raw. So they've been placed near the fire, not in it, just close enough that the heat is slowly breaking down the tough fibers and converting complex starches into digestible sugars. This is cooking, but not like you know it. No recipes, no precise temperatures, no timers. Just knowledge accumulated over thousands of generations about what heat does to different foods. The roots have been sitting there all night, slowly roasting in the residual heat from the fire that never quite goes out. By morning they're soft enough to eat, sweet enough to enjoy. You pull one out, careful not to burn your fingers. It's hot but manageable. You peel away the outer layer and bite into the flesh. It's not delicious by modern standards, but it's filling, and more importantly, it's safe. Raw, these roots contain toxins that would give you a nasty stomachache. Cooked, they're perfectly edible. This transformation, turning inedible plants into food through fire, might be one of the most important technological breakthroughs in human history. It effectively doubled or tripled the number of plant species your ancestors could eat. Tubers that were toxic raw became staple foods when roasted. Seeds that would pass through the digestive system unchanged became valuable nutrition when ground and heated. The evidence for this incredible dietary diversity comes from multiple sources. Coprolites, fossilized feces, have been found at archaeological sites across Europe and Africa. When scientists analyze them under microscopes, they find an astonishing variety of plant remains. Seeds from dozens of different species, pollen from flowers, microscopic fragments of leaves, roots, and bark. Some coprolites show evidence of insects, grasshoppers, beetle larvae, termites. These might seem unappetizing to modern Western palates, but they're actually excellent sources of protein and fat. Many contemporary hunter-gatherer societies consider insects delicacies, and there's no reason to think your ancestors felt differently. Dental calculus, the hardened plaque that builds up on teeth, tells a similar story. When archaeologists scrape it off Paleolithic skulls and examine it under high-powered microscopes, they find plant starches from across the spectrum. Wild grains, root vegetables, nuts, berries, even plant fibers that were probably chewed to extract moisture or to soften them for other uses. What emerges from all this evidence is a picture of incredible dietary flexibility. Your ancestors weren't specialized. They were opportunists, capable of exploiting virtually any food source in their environment. Coastal groups ate fish, shellfish, seaweed, seabirds, and sea mammals, supplemented with whatever plants grew near the shore. Inland forest dwellers ate deer, wild boar, nuts, berries, roots, and mushrooms. Groups living near rivers ate fish, waterfowl, aquatic plants, and the land animals that came to drink. This flexibility was crucial for survival. Environments change, seasons shift, animal migrations follow unpredictable patterns. A group that could only eat one or two types of food would starve when those resources became scarce. But a group that could eat 50 different things, they'd always find something. As you're eating your morning meal, others are doing the same. The young mother is sharing nuts with her toddler, showing him how to crack them, how to pick out the meat without getting shell fragments. He's not very good at it yet. His small hands lack the strength and coordination, but he's learning, and in a few years he'll be teaching his own younger siblings. The old woman is preparing something more complex. She's taken some of the leftover meat and is pounding it between two stones, mixing it with rendered fat and dried berries. She's making pemmican, though she doesn't call it that. It's just food that lasts, concentrated nutrition that can be carried on long journeys or stored for lean times. This is knowledge, technical and precise. The ratio of meat to fat to berries has to be right, or it spoils. The pounding has to be thorough, or it doesn't bind together. She learned this from her mother, who learned it from hers, a chain of knowledge transmission stretching back thousands of generations. Nobody's eating alone. That almost never happens. Food is social, shared, distributed according to complex rules that everyone understands implicitly. The hunter who made the kill yesterday isn't eating any more than anyone else. In fact, he might be eating less because that's how the system works. Kill an animal, share it with the group, and when someone else makes a kill, they'll share with you. This is insurance, risk pooling, the social glue that keeps the group together. Children run back and forth, stealing bites from different adults, getting swatted away playfully or having food pressed into their hands. Nobody's stingy with children. There's always enough to go around, or if there isn't, the adults eat less to make sure the young ones get fed. The meal isn't formal or ceremonial. People eat standing up, sitting down, walking around, checking tools, talking, laughing. But it serves crucial social functions anyway. Everyone's together, reinforcing bonds, sharing information, making plans for the day. Who's going to gather plants today? Who's going hunting? Who's staying back to work on that deer hide? These decisions happen organically, emerging from consensus rather than command. Someone mentions that the hazelnut trees by the northern grove should be producing well right now. Several women and older children volunteer to check. Someone else notes that there were deer tracks near the river yesterday. The hunters exchange glances, nod, start mentally preparing for a possible pursuit. Food preparation continues throughout this conversation. Hands are always busy. Someone's grinding seeds between stones. Someone else is sorting through dried herbs, discarding any that show signs of mold. A teenager is learning to use a sharp flint flake to slice thin strips of meat, preparing them for drying. These skills are crucial, and they're learned entirely through observation and practice. No written recipes, no formal instruction. Children watch adults try to imitate, get corrected, try again. By the time they're adults themselves, they possess encyclopedic knowledge about food, which plants are edible and when, how to identify them in different seasons, where to find them, how to process them, how to store them. This knowledge base is staggering. Ethnographic studies of modern hunter-gatherers show that they typically know detailed information about 200 to 300 plant species. They know which parts are edible, which require processing, which are medicinal, which are toxic, which are useful for other purposes like cordage or poison for arrow tips. Your ancestors almost certainly possess similar knowledge. They had to. Their survival depended on it. Eat the wrong mushroom and you're dead. Fail to properly prepare certain roots, and you're spending the next 3 days with debilitating cramps. This isn't casual knowledge. This is life and death information, carefully preserved and transmitted across generations. As the morning meal winds down, the fire is fed a few more sticks. The embers never go out entirely if someone's paying attention. Fire is too valuable, too difficult to make from scratch. Better to keep it alive, feeding it regularly, protecting it from rain and wind. Someone's always responsible for fire tending, usually rotating through different individuals. The meal wasn't elaborate, but it was adequate. Everyone's eaten something. Bellies are reasonably full. Energy levels are sufficient for whatever the day will bring, and that's really all that matters. Your ancestors weren't gourmets, but they understood nutrition in a deep, intuitive way. They knew that variety mattered, that different foods provided different benefits, that balance across days and weeks was more important than perfection at every meal. They were eating to live, but they were also living to eat. Food was pleasure, even when it was simple. The satisfaction of cracking a nut perfectly, the sweetness of ripe berries, the rich fattiness of bone marrow roasted over fire. These weren't just calories. They were experiences, shared moments, connections to the landscape and to each other. And now, with morning fully arrived and stomachs filled, it's time to get to work. The day's real activities are about to begin. Here's what nobody tells you about prehistoric life. The hunt gets all the glory. The dramatic confrontations with mammoths, the coordinated takedowns of deer, the dangerous face-offs with predators. That's what captures our imagination, what ends up in museums and documentaries. But here's the truth that would have been obvious to anyone actually living 40,000 years ago. Hunting was the exception. Gathering was the rule. On any given day, somewhere between 60 and 80% of your calories came from plants. Roots, tubers, nuts, seeds, berries, leaves, flowers. The percentage varied by season and location. Groups living near coastlines might have gotten more protein from shellfish. Communities in northern regions might have relied more heavily on meat during long winters. But for most human populations, most of the time, plants were what kept you alive. This wasn't because our ancestors were particularly fond of vegetables. It was simple evolutionary math. A successful hunt might provide enough meat to feed your band for several days, but hunts failed more often than they succeeded. Animals are fast, unpredictable, and dangerous. They require hours of tracking, careful coordination, and considerable luck. Plants, meanwhile, stay put. They're exactly where you left them last season, growing in predictable patterns that anyone with enough knowledge could learn to read. So while the hunters were out there hoping for glory, the majority of your band was engaged in the real work of survival, walking the landscape with practiced eyes, reading signs invisible to the untrained, collecting the foods that would actually end up in tonight's meal. Now here's where we need to be careful about assumptions. For decades, anthropologists told a neat story about prehistoric gender roles. Men hunted, women gathered. It was presented as natural, inevitable, maybe even biologically determined. But the evidence tells a more complicated story. Yes, in many prehistoric societies, women and older children did most of the gathering while men specialized in hunting. But not all societies, not even most necessarily. Archaeological evidence from various sites shows women buried with hunting weapons. Isotope analysis of ancient bones reveals some women ate diets as meat-heavy as any male hunter. Some groups practiced communal hunting where everyone participated. Others had specialized gatherers of both sexes who spent their entire lives perfecting knowledge of plants. The truth is probably this. Prehistoric societies were pragmatic. They organized labor in ways that made sense for their specific circumstances. In some groups, women who were pregnant or nursing might have focused more on gathering because it was compatible with carrying infants. In others, post-reproductive women might have become the most valuable members of the community precisely because they could hunt without the constraints of childbearing. The key point is this. Don't imagine gathering as something less important or prestigious than hunting. It was specialist knowledge. It required years of training, and it kept everyone alive. So picture yourself on that gathering expedition. It's mid-morning now, the sun has been up for a few hours, burning off the morning mist. You're heading out with 3 other people, your mother's sister, who knows the plant locations better than anyone in your band, a younger cousin, maybe 11 years old, who's learning the routes and the knowledge, and your own child, 3 years old, strapped to your back in a sling made from carefully softened deer hide. You're not just wandering randomly. You're following a mental map that's been built up over years of observation. The oak grove 3 miles north should have acorns ready for collection right now. The patch of wild onions near the creek will be past their prime, but there's a stand of cattails just beyond it where you can dig up the starchy roots. If you're lucky, you might find a beehive with honey. If you're really lucky, birds' eggs. The walk itself is no casual stroll. You're covering somewhere between 5 and 10 miles today, most of it over terrain that would challenge modern hikers. Rocky hillsides, thick underbrush, streams to ford, slopes to climb. You're doing all of this while carrying a child plus the tools of your trade. A digging stick, fire-hardened and worn smooth from use. Several baskets woven from plant fibers, nested inside each other. A leather bag for small finds. Maybe a stone knife tucked into a belt made from twisted plant fibers. But here's what makes gathering so different from hunting. It's not about adrenaline or drama. It's about attention. You're reading the landscape like a book, noticing details that would be invisible to outsiders. The slight discoloration of soil that indicates wild tubers growing below. The pattern of animal tracks that suggests a fruit tree nearby. The the specific angle of sunlight that